following presentation is a Delmarva Studios production.
Welcome back, Truth Seekers from around the world. It's time for another edition of the Flat Earth Files, and standing by, who we'll be bringing in just a minute, is Lauren from Australia. Before we do, just two quick reminders. Join us on our website, theflatearthfiles.com. Join us in the chat room. It's been very busy as of recent, and feel free to drop in to the forum. A lot of the questions that you send my way in the form of an email, you can also drop in the forum and get a lot more responses that way as well to your questions. And if you would like to email me questions, comments, concerns, or join us like Lauren is tonight, it is theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. All right, with that out of the way, we have a very special guest joining us from Australia today. Ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome Lauren. Lauren, thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's, I guess, Thursday morning, you said, 9 o'clock your time, so we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, George. As I said, I'm no one special, but I really just wanted to share my story, my journey to coming to Flat Earth and everything that happened in between. I've really resonated with hearing a lot of the other stories from listeners, and yeah, I think testimonies are really powerful. And so I just thought if I could share mine and maybe connect with someone out there, then yeah, that would be awesome. So thanks for giving me a bit of a platform, and thanks so much for your podcast. Like, I love it. I really just love like your measured and really down to earth approach. So it's really cool. And just the fact that you give, just average people out there like me the opportunity to just speak up, because I think it can be quite lonely when you come to, like waking up, especially to Flat Earth. It's almost like a persecution. And I think people, I know myself, I haven't shared it with a huge amount of my family and friends yet, because, people just really can take quite badly to even mentioning the topic. And I think you spoke about that in one of your other podcasts as well, that there's sort of a level, that goes up in terms of, can I speak, about this particular topic around the water cooler or not? And Flat Earth is pretty out there. So I think it's really great that people can just come on and just, kind of offer a bit of their story and perhaps get a few things off their chest that maybe they're not able to speak to friends and family and the like about. So, so just thought I'd come on and share my little piece, my piece of the God's big tapestry.
There you go. And thank you very much for the kind words. And we're all just trying to get through the days. And I think some of the common factors of all the emails I get, one is Flat Earth in most cases brings people closer to God. But really what you said a minute ago, and that's something that I go through myself. It is almost, and that's a word that I don't think I've ever used before, but you're right. It's almost a persecution, that people just look at you and like, well, George has lost it, and people kind of shy away from you, and it does almost become lonely. But at the same time, I just couldn't trade being awake to going back asleep, knowing the evil that traverses the earth on a daily basis. It's just something I can't look past. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I always say that my awakening was the most traumatic experience of my life, but I wouldn't change it for the world. My awakening was kind of funny because it was really slow in one respect, and then it was quite sudden in another. So from an early age, I always suspected something was a little bit off in the world. And I even remember when I was about 10 years old, I was in my mum's room, like jumping up and down on the bed, listening to what we had here was a TV show on the weekends called Video Hits, and they'd play like the countdown of all the top hits of the week. And there was a song, I don't know if you remember it, called Crazy by Seal.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. And even at 10 years old, that song kind of really struck me. It was like, something is crazy. Something is really wrong in this world. I remember jumping up and down on the bed and just thinking, what is it? Like, what is this world? And then not too long after that, a few years, we got like dial-up internet. And, at sort of 13, 14, I was looking at JFK and the moon landing, and I already decided that I didn't believe the moon landing. And so, to think that way back then, I'm 43 now, to think that way back then I was already sort of semi-awake, but it took me until more recently to fully come to that real conscious awareness is quite crazy. It's like for the majority of my life, I kind of understood that there'd been this huge lie that had been told to the world. And yet the gravity of that just didn't quite, hit me. And so I kept, just living my life. I was an absolute tearaway as a teenager, and, really rebellious, and kind of always went against the grain. And then when I was in my early 20s, I left Australia and went traveling overseas for 12 months backpacking, which turned into about 17 years.
Wow.
And I spent the majority of my time living over in London. But I saw a lot of the world. Like, I had a really great job over there that afforded me a lot of travel, and I got to see a lot of different things. But I was always very conspiratorial minded. And so I kept looking at all these different things, and my nickname was always like Conspiracy Lauren, and you're always looking at this stuff. Or one of my friends even one time had said to me, oh, come on, you get off on this kind of stuff. It's like, I don't really get off on it. It's like, things are happening in this world that are like, they're lies, and
right.
like that doesn't sit well with me. I'm not okay with it. So I have to kind of talk about it and get it out there. And I think, say 9/11 again, a lot of people, that woke a lot of people up. I was actually still in Australia when that happened. And obviously with the time difference, it was about 11 o'clock at night from memory when it kicked off over here. And I'd been working an afternoon shift, and I got home, and it was around that time where some of the like big Hollywood movies with all these great new special effects were coming out.
Yep.
And I just remember looking, and I was like, what movie is this? Like, I couldn't think, when I'd seen it advertised and that. And I mean, how funny now to have thought, oh, it was a movie, because right. we know, how orchestrated it all was. But I think really now reflecting back on that, it really shows me like the power of the spells that we're under. Because I remember, even though it didn't kind of wake me up, I remember the next day, I called in sick to work just so I could lie on the couch, on the sofa, and just watch the TV. And I was mesmerized. Like, I couldn't pull myself away from it. And now I think, like, this is what tells me that there's so much more going on a spiritual level than just the fact that there's some bad people doing some bad stuff. Because they have this power, they've got this power to really hypnotize us to the point where, like, we're not even believing our own eyes, And so I just, going back to all that, it was like, it was a bit of an awakening sort of at the time, but it wasn't until a few years after that I really started looking into 9/11 and realizing just how deep it goes. And but still, even at that point, I was still kind of only semi kind of conscious of everything. I was accepting that there were these big lies, but again, I just wasn't recognizing just how big that was. And
That's
so I was sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say two real things, if I can interject. You were
Yeah.
right about that timeline. There was two very significant events that took place in 2001 as far as programming, and I speak about that a lot. Like they did the movie Outbreak in the mid to late 90s with Dustin Hoffman, and then 2013 they did Contagion, and that's just two movies. There's they push the the fear of the germs. And when March kicked off in 2020, people, that's the programming they do to get your mind programmed to automatically, we must obey. May of 2001, the Pearl Harbor movie dropped, and that was 3 hours of blockbuster, this mind-based trauma, reliving what happened 70 years ago. But at the same time, there was the group who authored A New American Century that said it would take a new 9/11 to bring us into this new level of military and industrial complex that we see today. There was also a TV show on Fox right about the same time, April, May of 2001, where the plot was literally a plane was going to fly into, I don't know if it was the Empire State Building or whatever, but they program your mind to prepare these type of events, so when they do happen, you're more apt to accept it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and most of us sort of, come from a conspiracy angle, like look at The Simpsons and can see a lot of what they've done
Yeah.
there. And like I remember watching that, when it first came out, my brother and I could just about quote every episode, so getting us from a really, really young age as well. And I think there was another one. I remember seeing someone did a bit of a rundown on Back to the Future and the 9/11 programming in Back to the Future as
Lots
well.
of it. Yes,
I don't know if
absolutely.
yeah, like that was really interesting. I remember there was one bit where there's a camera angle that, like, if you flip the whole scene upside down, it basically is the two twin towers coming down.
That's correct.
There's a scene, yeah, so you know the one.
It
But
was the
it
in
is
the evening when
crazy.
they're at the mall and he's trying to save Doc, and that the electronic clock, and where it says Twin Pines Mall, if you turn that upside down.
Yeah, and I think there's another scene where they're watching, like it's inside one of the houses, and they're watching TV, and someone in the scene is actually hanging upside down. So he's watching the movie upside down, but when you flip it up around the other way, it shows the towers coming down. I don't know. Maybe the listeners like look into it. If anyone's listening and they're interested, it's like pretty mind blowing what they've done. But it's just all around us, and once you kind of wake up to it, you just start seeing it everywhere. And I
Yeah,
think you quote, is it Manly P. Hall that you quote that says
that's
like
right.
once you can read like the signs and the symbols, you'll understand the world more. Or like I'm misquoting that,
Yeah,
but
great veil
it's
will
so
fall
true.
upon man. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so there I was, just kind of conspiratorial, but not quite, accepting just how big it was. I think when things like Illuminati and that started to come up, I was like, no, that's a bit too far. It can't be that big. And then COVID happened. And I was in London at the time, and I was going along with it all, but I always remember feeling a bit like uneasy about the whole mask wearing, and
Hmm.
I was like, something just didn't quite sit right with me. And then after a while, I just sort of, my rebellious streak, I guess, probably more than anything, came out, and I was like, I'm not wearing these silly masks. Like they're just ridiculous. I look silly, and. um, and then we got. I worked in a job where we could work from home anyway,
Nice.
so straight away we were, yeah, it really was. um, Straight away we were told to stay at home. So that straight away gave me a little bit of extra time on my hands that I hadn't previously had. And I used to travel a lot with work, so we were completely grounded. So again, giving me a little bit more time on my hands. And I had in the previous years still been looking a little bit into like the Trump stuff, and I kind of predicted that he'd get in, and then he got in. And around the similar time, I'd looked into Pizzagate. Do you remember that
Absolutely,
rabbit
yes.
hole? Yeah.
Yep, with the
Like,
Podesta, John Podesta, and that whole thing.
yeah.
Yep,
I mean, that was crazy.
yep,
Again, now, like, the lies are so big, it's hard to tell where they start and where they end
indeed.
because everything's so orchestrated. And yeah, I mean, they play both sides of everything, and it is all the world's a stage. Like,
Yep,
no truer words have been said. So I don't doubt that really awful stuff like that is going on,
for sure.
but you know, yeah, how much of these bad guys are just fall guys, and they're living on like beautiful remote islands somewhere that we don't know about, while they're getting, taking the fall for X, Y, and Z. We just don't really know. But I certainly went pretty deep on the Pizzagate thing. And so, yeah, when COVID happened, I was already still off the back of the kind of Trump and Pizzagate thing. So I was back getting fairly deep into the conspiracies again. And I I started to think something's not right with all this. And I took myself off to Italy. I packed my dog and myself up, and we left London because like the lockdowns were just so like just horrific.
Mm.
I thought I don't want to be in the city anymore. So we drove to Italy, and I rented this really beautiful cottage in the middle of nowhere. I barely speak the language, although I do have Italian grandparents, so there was a little bit of familiarity for me. But I was like 10 minutes out of a very like small village, and again we went into a lockdown. So I was totally like just on my own in the middle of nowhere. Just had my dog and a laptop, and I started to dig really, really deep. And then I really started to wake up. And I really believe, I don't know if this is something you've ever experienced, but I really believe that in the lead up to those years, I was having some demonic attacks as well. And when I was in Italy, there were some very strange things that happened, like things that were, now I'm going to sound like a real kook, but like things that were moving, and, like furniture that was getting misplaced and stuff. And so I have heard other stories from people that when they kind of get close to that waking up period, they do have, they have experienced these sort of demonic attacks, and
Yeah,
like sleep paralysis and stuff like that. Again, which makes me like quite certain that we're dealing with, very spiritual dark entities. Um, but that moment when I really woke up. So I'll just go back actually and just say that I had a Catholic upbringing, but not very Catholic. So my grandparents, as I said, were Italian on my mum's side, and they were Catholic, and they brought my mum up Catholic, but like Catholic light. Like they just sort of thought these are some nice values. It wasn't a very like spiritual. They weren't Bible readers. It wasn't really brought into the home that
sure.
much. So I say Catholic, but it was just just a superficial like version of religion. And I did go to Catholic primary school and Catholic high school for a short while, but again, just here in Australia, and certainly when I was growing up, it was like just Catholic schools were like the private schools, so they were kind of seen as maybe a slightly better education than the public schools. So it wasn't, I didn't have a religious upbringing. And certainly when I hit my teen years, I thought that God was like a fairy tale and religion was pretty much the root of all evil. And I maintained that stance until just, just until a few years ago during the COVID thing when I woke up. And And it was, and this is why I said at the beginning, like it was a bit of a slow awakening, because from a very early age, I suspected something was wrong and was looking into all the conspiracies. But then it was a very quick awakening because, George, I had this moment. I don't think I'll ever be able to articulate it verbally, but it was like everything changed in my life
Yep.
in an instant. And all those little puzzle pieces that I'd been collecting
They snap
over
right
my
together.
life, absolutely.
Yep.
And I just knew, wow, there's a lot of evil in this world and God is real. And I ran outside, I got on my knees, I said the Our Father. It was the only thing I could remember. And then that was it. I knew God was real. Like, it's just a crazy moment. And yeah, and I don't think it would have happened if it hadn't been for all the lockdowns and all that, time spent alone and time reflecting and kind of, yeah, looking at the world. But I've heard you talk about when you came to Flat Earth and you had the 2 weeks of like not sleeping, and
Yeah.
I can relate, but I I wish mine was 2 weeks. I was not okay for like 12 months
Wow.
after waking up. I really struggled. So, and I guess this is maybe why I wanted to share a bit of my story as well, because
Sure.
I hear other people just sort of like, yeah, I woke up and then, the world was a lie and da da da. I was like, I didn't sleep for like 6 months. Not properly. I got on all those Telegram groups, and I don't know if you had them over there. Well, I know you had them because they were international, but
Sure.
I don't know if you ever signed up to them or anything.
Hmm.
But they would run 24 hours, and they'd have like open phone lines, and anyone from around the world could just drop in and just talk. And so everything was being shared on these group calls, and a lot of it was obviously really, really dark. And I remember two things from different calls that I joined, and one of them was someone saying, "Gosh, I'd really hate to be waking up now because there's so much information. Like, it must be blowing people's minds."
Sure.
And
Trying to
that's
play
sort of from
catch up.
people that
Yeah.
totally,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. Not to mention the fact that the entire world's just been locked down, and so that in itself shows just how big and coordinated and how many people were in on this. And I know it doesn't take, hundreds of thousands or millions or whatever. Like, it can be controlled by a fairly small group of people, but that's a huge amount of control to be able to lock down the entire world. And then pretty
Absolutely.
much
But it
like that go.
let me say real quick, it makes it so much easier when you control 96% of the media.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, definitely. And again, it kind of shows the power of the programming as well, because
Yep.
my job at that time, I was working for an association that, I mean, we had to say the word advocate, but we were basically lobbying for 5G. That was a huge part
Oh,
of my
wow.
role at the time of waking up.
Yeah.
So I went into a huge state of like fear and paranoia. So there I was, just coming to terms with this. The 5G agenda was, part of the stuff that I'd been looking into. And I'm, logging on to a job that is pretty much pushing all this stuff. And the 2 nights, like after I had the big moment of kind of, wow, God is real and this world is really kind of scary, I wrapped up every electrical device that I own with tinfoil, which apparently actually can help to like conduct.
Oh, yeah. Those Faraday cases, a lot of people buy them up. Yeah.
Oh dear. I wrapped my head, I tell this just because it's funny now, but I wrapped my head in tinfoil and I slept with a saucepan over my head for 2 nights in a row.
Oh, my goodness.
I was in such a state of fear. So,
But two things in that.
yeah.
Number one, once again, when they lie to you about everything, it's hard to discern what is what. So sometimes we do maybe go overboard a little bit, but that's just because we can't discern what is the truth. And the other thing is, as far as you working for a company that was advocating 5G, that's what you were going through. That's exactly how I was going through the latter few years of my time in the military, when I started to really understand how the world worked. And I was a part of that, so I completely understand, like, having, and sometimes as humans in our line of work, we are sometimes associated with some not so great people. There's a lot of people who listen, I'm sure, who work for banks, and we know the banksters are responsible for many of these wars. So I completely get your feeling on that.
Mm. Do you still have contact with any of your friends from your days in
Oh, yeah,
the
sure.
military? Like,
not as many
are
as I
there
used
any?
to, but we still talk.
Yeah. Are there any that you know of that are awake and still
No,
serving, or
no,
no?
no.
No. Is that because most have woken up and left, or there's just we're
No,
still
it's
struggling?
going back to the beginning. I've had friends that I served in combat with, very close friends. And when I start to come out of the closet, right, as a truther, and start to tell the things that I believe is going on in the earth, people tend to not contact me so much. So, it's a shame.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time with these people in some very rough times, but it really goes to show that it is, like you said, being persecuted. It's real when you come
Hmm.
out and start to express your beliefs. And then it goes back to part of the reason that got us through the BS that was going on in Iraq was, well, we're defending the Constitution, our right for free speech. And then when you put yourself out there, you get, like you said, persecuted. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. I want people to know who I am genuinely, and then at the end of the day, you end up your text messages don't come back too often as much as they used to.
Yeah. I've told a couple of friends, but they're more the friends that are definitely not judgmental, but they just haven't taken me seriously. And just like, oh, all right then. I just kind of laughed it off, and
Yeah.
never really questioned it much more than that. Actually, my husband is not there on it, which can be quite difficult at
Yeah, I can
times. And I know
imagine.
there's a lot of people in the same situation, and I've heard of actually marriages breaking down over it and everything, which is part of why I think, people can cling so easily to the idea that flat Earth is, a deception from Satan, because it is divisive.
Oh yeah.
And so, on the outset, it kind of looks like it could be from the enemy, but I don't believe that for a moment. And
Does your husband,
I
does he accept things like, let's say, the moon landing and Kennedy and 9/11, and it just kind of stops at flat Earth?
he he's a very practical man. So unless he can like tangibly prove something, he tries to just remain a bit on the fence. He definitely has suspicions around what happened at 9/11 and the moon landing. I haven't really asked him too much on it because I know that he just doesn't engage much with the flat Earth topic. So
Right.
I tend to leave it alone a little bit.
Gotcha.
But he certainly knows a lot of what's going on, like the corruption in the world. He
Good.
sees it for what it is. So, we're definitely on the same page about a lot of things, but that one's been a little bit of a tricky one to navigate around. And, for any listeners out there that are going through the same thing, like, feel free to reach out because it can be a really, really challenging thing when the people closest to you have, differing opinions. But we're navigating through it, like we're just we kind of put it on the shelf for the most part, and we just have to respect where each other's at. Like he's a Christian man, so his Christian values we do need to try and accept where people are at,
Amen.
and I believe this is on God's time, this one. So I tend to not push it on people just in general anyway. Uh, but for me, and I'll kind of go back to a little bit of my story in coming to flat Earth,
Yeah.
and so I had that moment where I accepted that God was real, but anything outside of that, as far as I was concerned, was probably a lie. So it took me a while to come to the Bible, and um, I I think a lot of people come down to the Bible through the path of prophecy, but that wasn't working for me because I was like, well, The Simpsons were prophesizing, and
Right.
uh,
Breaking through
so
the firmament and
yeah, yeah. So I struggled a little bit, and coming to Flat Earth, so I'd been kind of awake and had the awakening moment probably a few months prior, and I had looked into Flat Earth before, probably about 2017 and 2018. I did a couple of times, but even for me, I was like, that is out there. Like, these people are crazy. And it's because, of course, we all know when you first start looking into Flat Earth and you don't really know where to go, the stuff that they put out there is just absolute nonsense. And, it's designed to drive people away from it and make people think that it is absolutely crazy. So I kind of put it on the shelf, but then after COVID and kind of waking up to how big everything was, I was like, okay, I think it's time to go and have another little look at that. And I remember watching an Eric Dubay movie, one of his documentaries. I can't remember what one it was. I think it was called something like How Everything Works on a Flat Earth.
okay. And was he the one who did the flat Earth proofs as well?
He did, yeah. I think 200 proofs the Earth
There
is
you
not a
go.
spinning
Yep,
block.
yep.
Something. Yeah, so I put that on, and within 5 minutes, I just went, oh, and the Earth is flat as well. It's like, so there's all this stuff, but now the Earth is flat. But my acceptance of it, by this point, I'd already come to accept so many lies and deceptions and been through all the fear and everything, that it actually brought me a huge amount of peace. And I just went, wow. And again, it was like all the puzzle pieces of my life. I'd been on planes hundreds of times,
Yep.
like traveling all over, and just silly things. Like, I remember, flying certain destinations and the sun would like just literally be there beside you in the plane the whole time. Like, you're traveling with the sun and it's right there. You can see it in amongst the clouds, and, just things that just don't click at the time because we've been conditioned to view things in a completely different light. So, there's that. There's just, I never saw a curve. I really didn't. Like, you think you see a curve. You're seeing just sort of, it's like an edge because that's how far your eyes can see, and,
Right.
and that's about it. But there's no curve. There's no like buildings that are sort of tilted back because the Earth's curving around. It's nonsensical. And there's so many like places that I'd flown over where it was just flat for ages, and start thinking about things like, well, if the Earth's spinning and we're flying like east to west or whatever, like, why don't we just take off and let the Earth come to us? All these kind of things that just you never think about them before, and then you can't make sense of them. There's other ones as well, like they try and say that like a helicopter is moving with the Earth's atmosphere. That's
Right.
why it, and then you're like, well, what if you're going against the Earth's atmosphere? Why are we not feeling any push or anything? And I think you've just done something on the Coriolis effect, and I really want to listen to it because I'm not super familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure that moving with the Earth's atmosphere is completely contrary to the Coriolis effect. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Indeed.
You might have
And
covered it in
yeah, the reason I brought it up because we had a listener email us, and he said he remembered being in sniper school at Fort Benning, Georgia, and he thought he remembered being taught about the Coriolis effect. And then I replied to him. I said, during 2 of my 4 tours in Iraq, we were authorized snipers, and it was my job to purchase them equipment for their mission. So I went out, we got them a sniper sights. We got them a barometer, a wind detector, a handheld one, but nothing about the conversation never came out. So I pulled the FM, the field manual for sniper school, not a word. He goes back, we're chatting back and forth. He goes back, checks his notes. And he realizes he claimed it was put into whatever measurements are in it. So he's like, man, they bamboozled me. There's no such thing. And then I just kind of compared it to what you were exactly talking about with flight. Going back to before we had GPS in the 40s and 50s, when they were flying, they didn't factor in the spin of the earth. The only thing they factored in was the wind. That's the only thing they factored in. And one more thing, if I could add, since we're on this note.
Please.
Anybody can go to Travelocity or wherever you buy your plane tickets, okay? I want you to say you're departing Sydney, Australia, and you want to fly to Johannesburg, South Africa. Now, you're going to have a stop, no matter where you buy these tickets from, you're going to have a stop in Abu Dhabi. I want you to look at that flight path, the flight path on a globe, and then I want you to look at that flight path on the flat earth map and tell me which one makes sense, because the one on the globe makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. It's just all this stuff that we just haven't questioned, that just, once you kind of start to see it, it's pretty crazy.
Indeed.
I haven't really looked at the flight paths too much, but I know I've seen a couple of like the emergency landings that don't make any sense.
Yep.
And
yeah, definitely check that out. It makes no sense. You're literally going northeast and then down south, but on the flat earth map, you're just going pretty much straight across. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I feel like planes are a big part of, just the reality of where we live, and you can't make sense of a lot of these things on the globe. Which spins my mind that there's not more pilots coming out. Yeah. And I don't know if this is just the deep programming that they're under.
I believe it is.
What's your thoughts?
It's both. I think it could be the way, I think it's programming. I think the glass in the airline in airplanes are probably, they're beveled to an extent, so that may cause you to see some curvature maybe. I've never really noticed it in my flights, and I'm like you, I've flown, probably 100 times from, continental to around the world. And there's a couple things that I always go back to. I remember, on the transcontinental flights, looking at, why are we flying in this loop? Like, we would go up around Greenland, Nova Scotia, and curve back down towards London. It wasn't a straight line. But, I never put two and two together. It's just now that I'm awake and go back and think about that map they always had showing where we were, the flight path that they showed us, never make any sense. And they're a business, so why would they not fly in a straight line to save money on gas?
Yeah. And just the flight times being basically the same from one way to the other.
Exactly.
Like
if you're claiming we're spinning 1,000 miles an hour, we should have a significant difference in time. And the only thing, if we're coming west to east, it's going to be a little quicker, but that's only because of the wind.
Yep. And it's funny, like, I don't know if you've ever been on any of the kind of flat earth groups on Facebook or anything where they're debating back and forth. Like, it's almost impossible to debate, because you kind of, like, one is debating these complicated, like, mathematical equations with logic. And it's actually they're really difficult conversations and debates to have.
Yeah. Because,
like, those of us on the flat earth side, or flurfers, they call us flurfers. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yeah.
We just get, like, dumbed down as kind of simpletons. And, you're so silly, you don't understand the mathematics behind it. But the mathematics is it's just numbers. It doesn't actually mean anything. Like, there's no reality behind the numbers,
Yep.
And you're coming at them with, like, logical, arguments, which is, how are we moving with the atmosphere one way and not the other, or, east to west flight times and all that. And they can't quite see it. And sometimes I wonder, is there something deeper that's kind of going on? Because I know, like, for me, when I first came to Flat Earth, one of the big things for me was the moon. I just loved watching the moon, and, could recognize how close it was, and seeing, that it's not a reflection of the sunlight, and it doesn't look like a reflection of any light. It
Absolutely.
really does look like this perfect, huge torch in the sky. And you can see it move in between clouds and realize just, how much closer it is. But, even with my husband, we'll sit out there sometimes, and just every now and then when I'm feeling like I might not set him off on one, I'll be like, can you see how, like the moon's moving between the clouds? Like, can you
Hmm.
see that sometimes the clouds are in front of the moon and sometimes they're behind? Like, surely that means the moon's closer, or the clouds like 238,000 miles away. And he genuinely says he can't see what I'm seeing. And I think, what is it? Like, are they are people actually seeing something different? Was I previously seeing something different? Does something actually happen when we get awakened and that veil is lifted? I don't know if that's something you've pondered at all.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's programming. It's 100% programming. And I've said before, if a guy is wearing a lab coat and he's standing in front of a television camera, you're going to take his advice. You've never met this guy before. You've never met Tony Fauci. You don't know him from Adam, but you're going to take his advice over somebody you've met your own life, and it's all part of the programming. Somebody, Simon, I'm just going to say his first name, sent me a picture today, and it's of the sun. It looks like it's just above the clouds, shining down with the rays going in all these different directions. And he's like, could we have these sun rays going in all these different directions if the sun was 93 million miles away? And I get pictures all the time, and it's just amazing. And Nikola Tesla once said, we've gotten away from using our eyes and ears. I'm paraphrasing here, but basically science has gone from proving things to math, right? They use math equations to prove their point, versus you see somebody like David Weiss and these people who actually go out there with lasers and levels and do these experiments. And even in the 19th century, in the late 1800s, the Bedford level experiment, all these other experiments that didn't prove anything. That guy tried to prove that the earth was moving. He couldn't prove anything. Just because an apple falls on your head doesn't prove gravity.
That's it. Like, again, a lot of these stories about how, these discoveries were made are completely nonsensical. I'm pretty sure, like, Galileo discovered the rings of Saturn with his, like, telescope that was 33 times zoom or something really
33, there you go.
pathetic, like, yeah, don't quote me on that. I'm like 30 or 33,
sure.
But I've 33. No, I know you do a lot on the numerology. I haven't looked into it too much myself, but yeah, it's definitely one of their favorite numbers. And there's obviously a connection to Christ there, right? Because like Jesus died at 33, so I understand.
That's right.
So,
and David Koresh died at 33. Timothy McVeigh died at 33. So they intentionally they mock God. And like the 93 million miles, they use that 93 because April 3rd is the 93rd day of the year, and supposedly that's the day they say that Jesus died. So it's all mockery. It's what they do, is they mock us.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure they're laughing a lot. And I tell you what, though, they've got a sense of humor, because some of the things that come out in the news and that are just like, they're really quite comical. Even going to some of the NASA stuff, like there's liftoffs from moons where I'm pretty sure they've used glitter or something to show that.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because they show us on all the filming of the moon landing that the moon is this giant dust ball, right? But this giant dust ball is putting out this light that we see every day. Come on.
It's crazy. I don't know if you've seen the NASA Dark Side of the Moon clip, where they do, like, they've filmed it for a period of like 3 to 5 hours or something, and they're kind of filming from behind the moon, where I guess like the sun would be, and then the Earth's in front of the moon, and they're seeing the dark side of the moon pass across the Earth. And for 5 hours, like, those clouds don't move, nothing. It's like I even got my mum with this one. I showed her and I was like, come on, look at this. Like it's not real. And she's like, oh yeah, so it does seem quite strange, doesn't it? Like, yeah, if they lie about one thing, they lie about everything. Like what's to stop them? And even my mum's a
Absolutely.
bit skeptical on the moon landing. Sorry,
Yeah,
cut
no,
you off.
you're spot on. You have a friend after the second or third lie you catch them in, you're not going to believe anything they say anymore. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to walk away from them and not talk to them anymore because why would you hang out with somebody who you don't trust? And that's kind of the relationship I'm having with our government right now. I don't want to have be a part of them.
No, I agree. I don't think there's a political solution to
No.
this at all. And I understand you're a Bible man yourself, and I think the answers lie within.
Yeah.
So, which I mean, it took me a while to come to that conclusion as well. But I think one of the big things about coming to flat Earth, and one of the reasons why I do think it's so important, is because, well, like first of all, it just it reveals all the lies.
Yes.
It's one of the main ones that's underpinning all the other lies. So if you kind of remove that, you're removing like your Jenga stick right from the bottom of the pile, and all the rest kind of come tumbling down. But the other thing is, it's pretty much impossible to not point to a creator, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah.
And I do think Satan's using flat Earth to kind of snare a lot of different, groups and beliefs and philosophies. But I still think it's impossible to not point to a creator. And, and perhaps this is something like the ace that God like kept up his sleeve or something to use to really start bringing people to him, because I was an atheist who turned into a believer kind of overnight, and then flat Earth really brought me to the Bible and to Christ, and that's been a really incredible and powerful journey for me. Learning that that's the real history of the world, and and the rest of it's kind of been a bit of a lie. And I also think, and put this to you being like a biblical man, I think there could be something within the three angels' messages around flat Earth to a certain extent, because that first angel's message is fear God who made heaven and earth, and I think the waters, and or maybe the seas, and something. So, and if you then look at that particular verse and go back to Genesis, you'll see a direct relationship between what God actually created and the God that we're meant to fear in the first angel's message. I don't know if
That's
that's
right.
something that you've pondered at all.
No, I haven't, and it's that really strikes me. The first angel proclaims the everlasting gospel and calls for the restoration of the true worship of God as Creator.
Mm.
Wow, that's
So,
powerful.
yeah, yeah. So I know, a lot of people and even a lot of Christians will be like, what does it matter? Well, I think it does matter, because, it's even in the Ten Commandments, that we need to make sure that we're worshiping the right God. And,
That's right.
uh, I think if we're getting his creation wrong, then, maybe we're getting the God wrong as well. Like, I don't know. It's just a thought that I've had, but
No,
yeah,
that's a great thought. And you know what that kind of links me to is, and I don't mean to jump ship. I want to keep it on flat Earth. But when the whole COVID thing was going on, in retrospect, I always thought that was their way of telling us that God didn't make us perfect and we had to rely on man to survive.
hmm yeah, yeah, and just sends the whole of humanity down this path that we're not good enough
Exactly.
completely.
And we must
Yeah, and
depend
that's
on the smart people, the science, and that's science has in many people's cases, science has surpassed God. People worship science over God.
absolutely it's a religion. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting thing because I think, something else that I kind of woke up to through this whole process was if you're not sort of subscribed to a belief system, make no mistake, there's one like that's been prescribed to you. And I think for the majority of people, like even myself, who was an atheist, I was under the religion of Satanism because that's what the world is. That was kind of a big awakening moment. It's like, yeah, it's like science, that is a religion.
It is.
Not true science. There is true science, but
sure. And there is great people in the medical industry. I've seen. I had a friend who was blown up, and my gosh, the work that the surgeons do, it's amazing. But scientism with big pharma and these type of things, it is 100% evil. And then that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And I had a friend, and she was someone that really helped me during the early stages of my wake up, and her pathway to waking up herself was through the corruption in the medical industry.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a place for modern medicine. It's
Sure.
amazing, like emergency
Absolutely.
situations.
Yep.
And, but like these, vaccines and all that other like pills and that were popping at alarming rates. It's a slow kill. Like it's just a slow death,
It is. I mean,
It's pretty sad.
There's only you may not see it, but I think it's only the United States and New Zealand where they're allowed to advertise big pharma, and they promise you this miracle elixir during the first 15 seconds of the commercial, and then the next 45 seconds are all the side effects: stroke, blindness, death. It's like, are you really going to risk your receding hairline for a stroke or possibly death?
Yeah, it's crazy. I remember that when the times I've been over in America, because you guys are crazy on that stuff.
It's absurd.
Like the adverts you have on TV,
Yeah.
and then the kind of disclaimers that they run at the end of the adverts is just it's pretty frightening.
Yeah, and they're like, call
But
your
then it
doctor
just gets
today.
Yeah.
No, thanks.
Yeah, they want repeat customers. That's the bottom line, really.
Yeah, our healthcare industry is sick care. Is sick care is what it is.
Yeah, and super expensive. Like you
It's
guys have
awful.
a really
Yeah.
messed up system over there. So
Yep.
I had a couple of other like thoughts, just like biblical thoughts that I thought I'd like share with you as
Yeah, please.
well. And just to get your thoughts too. Like I've always been interested. There's a verse in Thessalonians that talks about God sending a strong delusion. And sometimes it makes me wonder, like, how much of this could it possibly be coming from him, like as part of a test? I do believe we're here being tested, and I do believe we will be judged for our actions on earth. I know people have different kind of understandings of that, biblically speaking, but I think that either God is maybe testing us with some of these delusions, or at least allowing them, so we are tested. And I thought I'd get your thoughts on that one.
That's interesting as well. Yeah, Second Thessalonians 2:11, and for this cause God shall send them a strong delusion that they should believe a lie. And when you say that, doesn't the COVID narrative fit right into that?
Yep.
And
So does
heliocentrism
Flat
as well, right?
Yeah,
The ball.
massively.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's another
I-
great
I-
observation.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting as well. Yeah. Um, the other thing that I was just thinking about as well is like the firmament and um, and sort of tied into extra land, because the extra land thing, and I know I've heard you and other of your listeners speak about Admiral Byrd and that, and again, it's not something I've looked into a huge amount.
Yeah.
But I sit on the fence a little bit about the extra like extra land outside, and I don't doubt it. It's a possibility. But then I had another thought about it, and if we think about the Tower of Babel and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, myself included, tend to think that that was their attempt to try and get to God. And if we think about some of the, like Operation Fishbowl and like trying to blow up the firmament, to me it feels like they see themselves as trapped here. And that also could tie in with their disliking for God, because they might actually believe that they are prisoners here under the firmament and they can't get out. And so they're misbehaving and they're, mocking God. And like, it seems if they had extra land and they could get out, could they just not get out? Or do we think maybe there's another firmament that blocks the extra land outside of this land? Or it's just an interesting thought, because, I really, like, if they had easy access in and out and moving all about the place, then some of the behavior doesn't quite fit with that. I don't know, just throwing it out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and that's something I wrestle with quite often. One of the things I think about is obviously if there's land outside of Antarctica, would it not require another sun? Because, I mean, do you understand what I'm getting at?
Yeah, definitely. And then how would we not see that sun?
Yeah, so there is a lot of questions. It's intriguing because, once again, they lied to us about everything. We're not allowed to go. I mean, you could spend 10 grand or whatever and catch a ride to Deception Island or Rothschild Island and have your little ceremonious picture with the penguins. But outside of that, we're not free to roam down there. So, a lot of it is just conjecture and, a lot of philosophy, a lot of thinking, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I just a general question as well. Like, this goes on in my mind a lot. I know that, historically, like, I think we're living through something big, something probably unprecedented, although, history tells us that there has been some pretty wild times in the past as well. But I feel like flat Earth is something a bit different this time round. And I just wonder, with so many people waking up to it, and more people are waking up to it, I believe, like, what's the end result here? Because how can we exist with two completely different ideas of cosmology on this planet for very long without something pretty big taking place? And so I guess from like the Bible's perspective, we kind of know what's coming, but we don't know when. But I feel that flat Earth is one topic that makes it feel like if we're in the end times, we're really in the very tip of them. And I guess I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm on board with you. And it takes me back when you were saying that. I kind of went back. I think in February, I interviewed Bart Sibrel. He was the guy who did the When Astronauts Go Wild. He would, he did a documentary on the astronauts. And something he said, he's not so much a flat earther, but what he was saying was, if we could prove that the moon missions, the Apollo 11 was a fraud, it would set off a chain of events that would lead to, this evil being seen by so many more people. And I think that goes hand in hand with the moon landing. If we could get it to, if this veil would fall, if people would accept flat Earth, I mean, number one, according to the history books, man's greatest accomplishment, hands down, is going to the moon, landing and coming back. Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, a Japanese rocket crashed on the moon, the story goes. And, we saw Friday the SpaceX launch. It got up 39 kilometers and they destroyed it. A $3 billion rocket they just destroyed. Never in the history of the world have we ever had something go this backwards, where, again, 54 years ago, we were able to land on the moon and come back. And now we can't even get a rocket in the air. And people still buy this stuff. I think people need to start putting two and two together. And again, I think COVID is a huge part of the reason why so many people are awake today, and why why Flat Earth has such a movement right now, because, well, if they're lying about this, I have to be open to everything. So,
Yeah.
And I also think I should say this too. I think to everybody who's listening to me right now, and we all have good days, we all have bad days. But God put us here during this time because he knew that we could handle it. So hang in there, be strong, and, continue the good fight, for lack of a better word, right?
Absolutely. I really believe that. And, no matter what sort of belief or philosophy someone's holding on to, I think that that would be true across, the
Right.
board for
Sure.
everyone, is that we're here at this moment in time by no accident
Yeah.
whatsoever, and that's really empowering, I think. I don't want to be all like self-helpy spiritual empowerment, but it is actually quite empowering to think that, wow, we're here and we can see this. So, even if it may just be a small part that we have to play, we have a special role
Yeah.
in history at this moment. And yeah, that gives me, kind of the inspiration to just keep moving, because some days it's really hard.
Indeed.
you know I gave up, when I kind of woke up. I gave up this pretty awesome job that was flying me all around the world, and it afforded me a pretty nice life. I now work as like a gardener, and I work as a teacher's aide part-time as well, which is, well, that's interesting. Being in the public school system, that is a moral conflict on a daily
Yeah, I
basis.
can imagine.
It's tough,
Hmm.
it's wanting to be there because the kids, most of them don't, and they sort of have to be.
Right.
And, you just want to try and bring just a little bit of kind of some sort of normality, and just maybe a rational mind. Not that I'm claiming to be the most rational person, but just being able to help them see things from a different perspective, and just to encourage them to think for themselves and think outside the box. And but at the same time being conflicted by all the kind of woke nonsense that's being pushed into the school systems. And yeah, it's just really confronting, actually, just to see what humanity, where we're at now. It's all coming out in our children. The years of sin passed down through the generations,
Yeah.
and now we're just seeing it manifest itself in these poor innocent children that
Yeah.
just don't know any better. And I've got like 5 and 6 year olds that are, they're different genders. They're proclaiming different genders to what they were born. And the behavioral challenges, like as a teacher's aide, I think historically it was there to be like support to academic learning, but it's all behavioral now. And the school that I'm in is not even a really challenging one. There's some schools that I understand, I don't know if it's the same over there, but the education support, the teacher's aide, they'll sometimes have like 5 or 6 in a classroom, supporting the children that have those additional needs. So it's been pretty eye-opening. But yeah, I gave up my entire kind of world to when I woke up and realized what was going on. So that's been, really, really difficult. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going through that same
Sure.
walk. You kind of question everything, when you can see that the world's kind of really corrupted. It's really difficult to pull yourself out of that, and to not be part of it, not be contributing too much to it. And I know when I came back to Australia, when I left London, like it was during all the mandates starting to come in, and I was pretty terrified because I knew I didn't want that needle. So I was quite, quite frantic trying to get back to Australia, where all my family is, after being abroad for 17 years. And yeah, just yeah, I found it like pretty tough. And it was just a scary time. And starting life all over again, I I kept saying, I just want to live in a shack in the woods. That's it. My mum thought I'd lost my mind completely. And then I actually met my husband, like, was during all this chaos, and he actually was living in like a bush hut. And so we kind of, we're like two peas in a pod in that respect. But it's been awesome because, I've gone from like that, sort of shallow corporate world to, growing a veggie garden, and we live completely off grid. Completely off grid.
That's
And
fantastic.
and I think this is one of the beautiful things that's come out of this, is there's so many people that are moving towards, a more like sustainable and self-sufficient, because our self-sufficiency has been taken away. I mean, we've handed over our power, there's no doubt about it, but our self-sufficiency has kind of been bred out of us through generations of convenience and ease and, computers and all sorts. And we don't, we're now learning again how to take care of ourselves and to feed ourselves and to keep ourselves healthy. And, perhaps things like this needed to happen to really wake us up to just how corrupt the world actually is. And so, it's hard to say where this is all headed, but certainly there's been some like beautiful positives and that to come out of this whole kind of tragedy and, the COVID, like the COVID agenda. So,
Well, there's so much to take. That reminds me of there's that whole phrase, hard times make good men, and the rotation. If we don't experience difficulty, they say everybody in prison is religious. It takes hard times sometimes for us to be able to see God. And I can't remember the whole thing, but it talks about hard times make good men. And then, we relax and it brings difficult times. There's somebody I follow, but I don't really pay attention to that much, but he posted something today that came across my social media that really made me think, and it directly connects to what you just said. Tim Pool said, I think we should ask ourselves why so many young people desperately want to be someone else instead of themselves. And that goes directly to what you said. For generations, we've never put our foot down and said, no, this is immoral, this is wrong, and we've continued to turn away and ignore it, and look what it's festered into. Now, even here in our I'm just in little old Delaware, and our hospital is now accepting gender patients for 14-year-olds. It's just evil, and it's and this is just something that, because we have allowed and just turned away and let it happen, whether it's because we're too comfortable or we don't want to be that guy, right, out there with a megaphone, which is very uncomfortable. Yep. I did it one time during COVID, and it was the most uncomfortable. I felt more comfortable walking down the streets of Baghdad than standing in Dover with a megaphone saying that everybody is essential. That's when my wife got fired for not taking a jab. It's very intriguing. But I've also said that, if we want to make a difference in this world, we have to start doing things that might be a little bit outside our comfort zone. And little things like that, if you wake one person up, that person might wake one person up, and that's how we win this thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think just spreading the word and getting it out there is just hugely important, even if it is just quietly, one person at a time, as you say.
Yep.
We don't all have to be on megaphones, but that's awesome that you did that. Like, it is uncomfortable.
Very.
It's really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And spreading the word of God too. I should say that too. Make sure.
Sorry.
And spreading the word of God. When you're spreading that, I always thought, make sure we spread the word of God as well.
Well, absolutely. And again, that points back to, for me, the importance of flat earth. Like, it's there, it's in the Bible. And although, a lot of people, and sadly, it's Christians that are trying to deny that the Bible says this. And, it's, it just boggles my mind to think that that's where the challenge is in trying to get this message out there. Because I once went online and I took like hundreds of screenshots of people's testimonies, just random people that I came across on like flat earth groups and YouTube flat earth videos, and their testimonies of how this either turned them atheist to believer overnight or just brought them closer to God. And the churches, the mainstream churches, are just ignoring it, or they're ridiculing it. And it blows me away that the people that are meant to be, for Christ and bringing people to the Bible and to God are the ones that are rejecting it the most, making all these excuses like, oh, the firmament's just air, or it's just an expanse. And I was like, that's not possible. Like, because further along in the Bible, you'll find that the firmament is described as like, strong, like molten looking glass.
That's
like
right.
Air or an expanse is it's not hard, it's not strong, it's and how can what's the verse that's on Werner von Braun's?
Yes, that's Psalms 19:1, right? And God showeth his handiwork with the firmament.
That's it. Like, handiwork doesn't describe air or an expanse. Like, handiwork is something tangible, like it shows someone's power and skill. And so all these things that they try and backpedal on and make excuses about. Or one of my my least favorite ones that they'll try and use is well, God wrote that, or God said that, described the earth that way for the people that were living there in that time, because they didn't understand like the full complexities of outer space and all this. And my thing with that is, like, that's a really slippery slope, because what else did God lie? They're accusing him of lying. Like, that's a lie that he's told them. If they're and so what other lies did God tell in his word just to cater to the simpletons of that time?
Right.
It's a really dangerous ground, I think, for people to be treading on when they're saying that. So
you can't pick and choose what is outside of Proverbs, I guess, because Proverbs are meant to be, here's some Proverbs, but you can't pick and choose. Well, this is just an exaggeration. This is the way God told a story. I mean, it's either God's word or it's not. And if you look at Genesis 7, verse 11, I'm going to read it real quick. It says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, 17th day, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. And we know the firmament, God, it's God in the beginning of Genesis, God separated the waters.
Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It really is. Don't you enjoy it? Like, I love looking at the world now through the eyes of a flat earther, and,
absolutely,
and looking at it's so powerful. And I think, I've struggled a couple of times when I've tried to share, because my excitement overtakes me and I become so overzealous trying to share that I just have to like back down a little bit. But I just want everyone to know. I want everyone to see it, because it's actually way, way cooler than all this outer space nonsense. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
We're in this beautiful little protected container, everything just giving life to itself. It's just so incredible. It blows my mind. And I hope more and more people can start to see it for what it really is. It's just,
indeed.
Yeah.
Well, this has been just a powerful, powerful interview. You have done a great job. You should be a podcaster yourself. You were really lay your thoughts out extremely well. And man, I hope we can do this again in the future. Let me ask you one more thing. Speaking of that, have you had any luck trying to relay messages to others? Have you noticed any certain breadcrumbs you can live with people to pique their interest, or any luck with that?
Not a huge amount, but I haven't been super vocal about it. What I did manage to help sort of coordinate the other day, and this might be an avenue for people as well. I really love the historical aspect of like picking heliocentrism from the 500 years ago kind of deceptions that played out, and it was like a counter-reformation movement basically.
Yep.
And there's an awesome documentary called Heliosorcery, and I think I sent the link to you. I came across that and then got in contact with the makers of that, and they're a small ministry here in Australia that just made this really brilliant documentary on the history of it. They came through town. I organized my baptism with them, actually. And they came through town last week, and we organized a small like meeting with some local sort of semi-awake people. And at the end of that meeting, we did have someone else say yes, like, okay, I can see it now. And I think that historical aspect, like looking at the history of it rather than just going, the earth's flat, we've all been lied to, actually talking through the history of it could be a gentler avenue for some people. So I think if people haven't seen the documentary Heliosorcery, it's a really good one to share for people that might be open, but not quite there yet, because you can't, the history of it just shows how it's been a full attack on the Bible. So maybe a good one for Christians that aren't fully rejecting it just yet as well.
Yeah, you did. And by the way, I'll make sure I put that link in the show description, the Heliosorcery link. You did send that to me. I'll drop that in the show description, so folks, if you want to check it out. And you just connected another dot, because I actually, on my other podcast last year, I did the 30-Year War and Martin Luther and Reformation, about, at that time Catholics were buying penance into heaven, and he did the 93, the whole thing that kicked off Reformation, right? That was in, the early 1500s. And, I'm just sitting here pulling it up. In 1533, Johann Widmanster delivered in Rome a series of lectures outlining Copernicus's theory. That is actually, like you said, an anti-Reformation message. And I don't think the timing is off. And Martin Luther is even quoted a few years later saying that there is talk of a new astrologer who wants to prove the earth moves and goes around instead of vice versa. So you can either trust Martin Luther or you can trust the Jesuits.
Exactly. It's I love the historical element of it. That again was point. What helped seal the deal. And
he closes with saying, however, as Holy Scripture tells us, so did Joshua, that the earth stands still, and not, the earth stands still and it rotates.
Yeah, you can't deny it. That, and also I think that God made two great lights. Like, you can't mix up those words. That's very plain language. Two great lights, And later on, Jesus even talks about the sun and moon in terms of having genders. So he calls the sun a him and says the moon shall not give her light or something.
That's
so
right.
It's very distinct that they're two completely different objects emitting different lights. So,
and it should be noted that the evil people at Wikipedia were quick to point out, as soon as at the end of that quote, Site 91 and 92. This was reported in the context of a conversation at the dinner table and not a formal statement of faith. Melanchthon, however, opposed the doctrine over a period of years. So again, as soon as you read that, they're like, by the way, it was just a dinner conversation. He probably had too much wine. Don't buy into it, right?
Yeah, that's funny. One other thing I will say, which is maybe a good tip for people, I do join a lot of these Facebook groups of flat earth and whatnot. I can only spend a limited amount of time in them because my skin is only so thick. But what's a good thing to do is to go and have a look at the other members and have a look at who you have mutual friends with. Because I found out through that slightly loose connection, but my sister-in-law's twin sister was part of that group, and I found out, oh my goodness, I actually do have some remote family members that are also flat earthers, and I would never have known that if I hadn't gone in and looked for all those mutual friends through other members of flat earth groups. And I have other like loose contacts in that, so it's kind of helped me to show, wow, there is a lot of us. There's a lot more of us than we probably suspect. So don't ever feel alone. Like we're out there in mass, I think.
Absolutely. And again, to all the listeners, feel free to drop into the chat room and If you have questions, you can email them to me, but you can also leave those in the forum. And there's a lot more people who get eyes on, and you'll get different answers. And, you can choose what resonates best with you. So don't be afraid to use these tools. There's a lot of them. I know Celebrate Truth on YouTube. It seems like they go 24/7 all the time, and there's lots of like-minded people. I can't speak to the type of people that are in there, but I know there are certain avenues where you can find like-minded people because, going back to the beginning of our conversation, it can be a bit lonely and disconcerting when you wake up. The people kind of shy away from you because they would rather, they enjoy their bread and circus and would rather not be bothered. And that's one of the monumental tasks that we have. And again, we can only lead a horse to the water. We can't force him to wake up.
It's on God's time.
Yep.
It really is.
Indeed.
Yeah. And I'll leave my email with you as well. If anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm always happy to have new friends. So.
Yeah. Do you want me to use the one that you emailed me with?
Yep. That's perfect.
And that's the NolaJane@protonmail.com?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay, folks, and it'll be in the show description. Don't feel like you got to write it down. So you can just go to the show description, copy and paste, and you can send an email to Lauren, who has just been tremendous. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, but you've brought so much information that is going to certainly resonate with so many people. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention that we haven't covered yet?
No, not really. Just to say that, don't feel alone. There's plenty of us out there. We're all fighting a good fight in our own special way, and we are all special. Like, don't take it for granted that you've got these eyes to see the world for what it really is, and just keep on going on. Every day is a new day.
And that's the difference between heliocentrism and the flat Earth. They want you to believe that there was an explosion and, fish crawled up on the beach and continued to evolve, and you just happened to be here during this time. Nothing could be further from the truth. God wants you here at this time to help spread the word. Lauren, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, George. God bless.
God bless you too. And stand by for just one more second. Ladies and gentlemen, for Lauren and myself, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Feel free to jump in the chat room and the forums at theflatearthfiles.com. And if you'd like to join the program like Lauren did, it is, again, theflatearthfiles@gmail.com. Everybody have a great week. And until next time, keep your head on a swivel, and we will see you.
T-Mobile has invested billions to light up America's largest 5G network, from big cities to small towns, including right here in yours. And great coverage is just the beginning. Right now, families and small businesses can save up to 20% versus AT&T and Verizon when they switch. Visit your local T-Mobile store today.
Plan savings with 2 to 3 lines of T-Mobile Essentials versus comparable available plans. Plan features and taxes and fees may vary.
Hey, hon, we really need new phones.
T-Mobile will cover the cost of 4 amazing new iPhone 15s, and each line is only $25 a month.
New iPhone 15s? Best new year ever.
Get 4 iPhone 15s on us with eligible trade-in when you switch to T-Mobile.
Minimum of 4 lines for $25 per line per month with autopay discount using debit or bank account. $5 more per line without autopay, plus taxes and fees. Phone fee at 24 monthly bill credits for well-qualified customers. Contact us before canceling account to continue bill credits or credit stop and balance on required finance agreement due. $35 per line connection charge applies. See T-Mobile.com.